back. WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. We're live in Miami Beach. We're back at the Miami Beach Convention Center. It's been 13 years since we broadcast live from here. They've sort of fixed the place all up. I brought my own planners here from Sporticulture. I got my dear friends from Raskin Global brought me some lip balm, which I need because I'm breaking out then. I got Liberty Pure water here because you can't drink the water in South Florida. You know that. And somebody better bring me some coffee from Royal Farms to get me working here. Professional sports bettor from Philly. I don't know Steve Maltepes, but I'm about to get to know the Philly Godfather. You know how much time I've spent in Philly? I mean, Flyers games, Eagles season ticket holder back during the Buddy Ryan era. I was a Phillies fan in the early 80s of Carlton and Rose and all that stuff. I've always hated the Flyers. And this guy here has become a Sixers guy. It's crazy. It's
because of my brother-in-law. That's how we bonded.
I was a Sixers guy when it was Chocolate Thunder and when, Dr. J's making some house calls, but not since then. Good to see you, man. Welcome in.
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Sports handicapper in Philly. There's no illicit gambling has ever happened anywhere near Broad and Patterson, right?
Just every corner bar, every bodega you can think of in the city of brotherly love.
Well, you got the great Philly accent. Why does everybody from Philly sound like Howard Eskin to me? Why does everyone?
Don't tell me that.
It's the same. It's the accent, man. It's for you with handicapping in the modern era. And I've talked to people in New York about this, and obviously Atlantic City, Vegas. We're putting a football stadium in Vegas. This thing here, right, going across the state line, right, Jersey, all that. That the laws and handicapping and what was once in the alleys and once this is coming for everybody, right? The 800 number has now become something for someone like you to say, we're all online, we're all in this together and trying to figure out how to make money in gambling, right?
Yeah, it's a massive explosion. It's actually good with all the tax revenue we're going to be bringing into all these cities, for our schools, for our infrastructure, for our roads. Instead of it going to the black market offshore, some of the shadowy
Costa Rica's
figures.
Been doing stuff for a long time.
Long time. They're making a lot of money, and it's a lot bigger than most people expect. I went on TV a couple years ago, and I said within the next few years, you're going to see in-house sports books at a lot of these stadiums, at a lot of these basketball stadiums, football stadiums.
Well, they've had that in London, and they've had that in Europe for years.
Exactly.
Right?
So anyone who's traveled abroad
I would
knows.
think the cricket matches the same way in India. I don't know that to be true. But
I've never been to India, but
right. But, I mean, action on sports is in America, I guess because of the Black Sox, because of thrown fights, because of Don King.
Tim Donaghy.
Well, that's more modern, but I would say culturally, I'm 51. You appear to be in the similar, we're not quite okay boomer. Certainly I'm not, but and don't profess to be, but it's been a shadowy thing. I mean, Luke, back in the 90s, before we even had the Ravens, I would do this Friday Football Friends. We'd make our picks, and Vito would make his picks in the sun and whatnot, and we'd have pool cards, and, how far we've come from that, and Brent Musburger and Jimmy the Greek elbowing each other and talking about the intangibles and talking point spreads on NFL Today in 1976 to it going completely away where ESPN wouldn't put a spread up on TV, to all of that, for the league running from Vegas and we can't have anything to do with this, to now, well, let's build a stadium. Sheldon will, slide us a couple of $100 million out, and the Vegas governor looked the other. It is an amazing thing that Europe and these other places, we would always say, well, they're so far ahead of us, and Paul Tagliabue would hold his nose, and David Stern would hold his and say, never here. That's all over with now. The genie's out of the bottle. I mean, the DraftKings stuff a couple of years ago and all the fraud going on online. It's about offshore fraud. There's a lot of fraud in that. The old-fashioned, here's $20 on the game, here's $100 on the game, they're going to get a piece of this, right? They're going to get in on this, and that's where an officiating and cameras and all that, where they're going to be the judge and jury in this.
Yeah, well, I mean, they already have partnerships with MGM. Fox has their own sports book now. I mean, it's amazing how things have changed. I've got friends that were doctors and lawyers, and for years, they didn't want to place any wagers because of their names, because of their professions. Now they're calling me up. Who do you like tonight? Who's going to win the Super Bowl? So the whole aspect of, everything has changed about. Before it was taboo. Now it's wide open. It's actually kind of sexy to be a sports bettor and to handicap games, and it's just the whole thing's flip-flop from before.
Well, before it was the back page of the USA Today and call my 1-800 number, and Jim Feist, all of that's
Those guys
for
were
you.
marketers, though. Those guys were marketers.
Okay, so what are you then? I mean, as the Philly Godfather and a guy that handicaps in the modern era where anybody can bet, they can bet legally, they can drive across the state line, they can go to Vegas and get action. So there's a lot more ways to get action now that if I found someone that was a soothsayer, which I don't know that I believe that, and I've talked to handicappers for 30 years doing radio, I find it interesting to discuss aspects of the game.
Well, most of the guys are marketers that come on, buy my pick 1-800. We hit 80% of our wagers, and that's all a bunch of
malarkey.
The best a professional sports bettor
I like
will
that
do.
word. You like that word, Luke?
It's pretty good.
The best we're going to do is
57%
long term. So we basically have a 4.5% edge over the house. Now, what people don't understand is the sports betting market is like any other market, the real estate market, the stock market. You really got to invest time and research if you want to try and get some clarity or find value in the market. Most average bettors wake up on Sunday and remember the last thing they saw last week and say, I want to place a wager. And I tell everyone to pump your brakes. Listen, if you want to make a living in this, if you want to beat the 52.4% that you got to do better than when you're laying 110 to win 100, you got to actually do your research. Just like if you're looking to go buy your first house, you're going to spend 30 hours looking at 20 different houses, looking at the upgrades, looking at the schools, looking at the hospitals, the demographics, the crime, before you find value in that first house you're going to buy. So imagine you spent 10 or 15 hours researching the game, looking at the analytics, looking at all the qualitative factors surrounding the matchup, looking at who's banged up, who's not, import and export injuries. If you do your research and you look at all the quantitative factors and all qualitative factors, you're going to have an educated guess. You're going to have a better chance of winning more than 52.4% of your games, and that's what this is all about. It doesn't matter what market you're in. If you're doing your research and you can beat the number, get ahead of the market, you're going to win long term, and that's what it comes down to.
Well, Luke and I talking football week after week, how many analytics sites are out there, and Aaron Schatz is going to come by this week at Football Outsiders and measuring all this stuff. Then there is I was down here in Miami 17 days ago planning a big Ravens Super Bowl party, right? We're 14-2. And then that happens, right? Then sports happens on a night where you would say, I love the Titans in 10 points on the road against Lamar Jackson, and certainly this time next year when Lamar Jackson has his next playoff game and is 0-2 at home in games where they were favored to win, then all of that takes over and you say, are you going to put it on him or against him? And that's what guys like you do for a living.
Skewed statistics are a sports bettor's best friend. Lamar Jackson's a great athlete, amazing football player. I was one of the naysayers all years when he was tearing up the league. I said, pump your brakes. The playoffs are lurking. And the playoff game is a lot different game than in the regular season. And we saw the difference in the game. Sure, he had a bunch of trash yards towards the end of that game, but when that game was 14-6, you saw the difference. The pressure got to him, 2 interceptions, 1 turnover, and he's still a young kid, and he's an amazing talent. But I was one of the naysayers saying, hold up with this kid, because come pressure time, it's a different ballgame. If you look at the Super Bowls where quarterbacks have started under the age of 24, okay, I think it was Marino, Woodley, Jared Goff last year, and Roethlisberger. They're 1-3 in the Super Bowls. Now Mahomes is coming in. He's a young kid. I got 2 kids in college, 26 and 21. They're 24-year-old kids, man. They're young, and I don't care how great Mahomes has looked during the regular season. This is the most dangerous, most prolific defense he's ever faced on the biggest stage of his life, and he's 24 years old. And like Lamar Jackson, he was a young kid.
That's why I don't bet on this stuff. See, that's why people say, why don't you bet on it? I know which way the ball bounces. I've had NFL coaches say to me, I can't believe people bet on this. Like, I have no idea whether we're going to win this week or what side of the bed my guys are going to wake up on.
You got to do your homework. It's just like any other market. You see the numbers fluctuate. When I lay 6 on a game, okay, the game is going to go to 7.5. What that means is the odds makers give me respect on my action because I'm a long-term proven winner. They keep track of everyone. I'm labeled as an advantage player. I've been doing this since 1988 when I moved out to Vegas and was moving from some of the sharpest guys in the world that you've heard. They've been on 60 Minutes. That one guy has made close to $1 billion betting on sports. So I learned from the best of the best, and then eventually from running for these guys, I said, I got to learn how to handicap these games and all the gambling angles and how the weather affects football games on the totals, because one day they could be like, you know what, Steve, you're fired. And then what am I going to do? So I learned from the best. I've been doing this for over 30 years, Vegas, Costa Rica, you name it. We were in the forefront of the gambling industry, and now it's crazy because now they got me on national TV. I'm doing Fox Business with Stuart Varney on Friday, and they're asking me for my opinion. And the whole thing has flip-flopped so much. And when people used to be scared to talk to me. Now it's become so mainstream. It's amazing.
Well, I think the other thing for a real gambler is knowing what game you really like. Finding the game or matchups that you like, not just betting 5 games on a weekend, right?
Not just that. You got to be able to accept the fact that you're going to lose 43% of the time. And you can't chase. You're going to have good streaks, bad streaks. They're going to be come and go. And at the end of the day, it's money management. You got to treat it like a business. If you treat it like a business, it's going to pay like a business. If you wake up on Sunday or Saturday and treat it like entertainment, you're going to go broke.
Steve Maltepes joining us here, professional sports bettor, the Philly Godfather. You can find him at phillygodfather.com. So for you and for this game and this matchup, you've already shown a little bit of your cards on Mahomes. Some thoughts about the 49ers and this sort of legendary defense this week?
I mean, the defense is unbelievable. And you got to remember, teams that get to the quarterback go deep in the playoffs and usually get to the Super Bowl. The last 10 teams, I think it was, that had over 50 sacks on the year end up winning the Super Bowl. So, I mean, pressure burst pipes. And a lot of people downgraded their defense late in the season when they went through, the toughest part of their schedule. But they were missing D Ford. They were missing their linebacker. They were missing some key components. Sherman was hurt on the defensive side of the ball. So their production numbers fell off big time. And that's why I always tell people, skew statistics are your best friends. Their defensive line, their actual power numbers are truer than what you see on paper right now. That's how good that defense is.
Well, it's a better team than we saw 7-8 weeks ago in Baltimore, right?
I thought it was a pretty good team when they came to Baltimore. To his point, the schedule was much more difficult. They had some injuries, but if you look at opponent adjusted, yeah, they fell off, but it wasn't this. They went from being one of the best to terrible. It was more like, hey, pump the brakes, and they get some guys back. And when you can create pressure the way they do consistently with a 4-man rush, I like your chances, period.
And you got to remember, they spent $90 million on defense this year,
sure.
40% of their cap space. So they spent big money to get a defensive juggernaut. And then you got Shanahan, who's an offensive genius. You saw what happened with the Falcons when he left that team. Their offensive production numbers fell off. Sure, they had some injuries, but you never know what play he's calling. He's amazing. And everyone's talking about Raheem Mostert, how great he's played. But let's be honest, 6 teams cut him. Mm-hmm. Okay, he had 220 rushing yards. It's the system that he runs in.
I mean, look at some of those running lanes he had.
Wide open.
Yeah.
Wide
no
open.
Question.
So how do you stop that? How do you stop a team that's so good defensively and can control time of possession and runs the ball down your throat? It creates so many matchup problems. If you take each quarterback off either one of these teams, I mean, the nucleus of San Francisco's is so much better.
And how, on the flip side, a lot of people have made a lot out of Kansas City's defense getting better. How much are you putting stock into that? They did a good job against Derrick Henry, but again, you got to look at the full body of work.
But then you got to stop one running back that runs up and down the field.
Right.
Now you got to stop a running scheme, a running system. That's a lot harder to do. And if you look at the teams they've played, Tennessee and Houston, you look at the nucleuses of those teams, the trenches, some of the worst offensive line, defensive lines in football. So those numbers are really skewed. Yeah, Mahomes is putting up an average of 40 points per game in the playoffs, but he's not doing it in the Super Bowl, I guarantee you. I just put a big wager. I'll give it to you guys. I went under 55.5 for max limits in 10 different spots that I bet in. I love the under in this game. This game's going to be won or lost Kansas City's offensive line, okay? If they can hold those guys at bay, which is very difficult to do, Mahomes ain't going to win the game. Tyreek Hill ain't going to win the game. It's going to be that Kansas City's offensive line. If they can't, they're in for some serious trouble. Mahomes was sacked 4 times only once this year. I think it was back in Week 5 against the Colts. Okay? And the final score was Colts 19-13. And that's when the Colts had the 8th best pass rush in the NFL. They were kind of healthy on the defensive line. So they got pressure. I think they hit him 8 or 10 times. And you saw a totally different Mahomes. And the other thing is Joey Bosa and Nicky Bosa. Every time the Chargers played Mahomes this year, his numbers fell off dramatically. I mean, he was averaging like 180 passing yards per game. So you got that factor. You got the D Ford factor, who knows what kind of offensive line they do have and what kind of schemes they run. So that, to me, that's really big as well.
Steve Maltepes, the Philly Godfather. You can find him at phillygodfather.com. Nice to meet you, man. Thanks for coming by. Talk a little handicapping, a little, we wish we were here, right? I mean,
well, if you guys follow me on Twitter, I put my futures at the beginning of the year. San Fran at 28-1. Actual real betting tickets on my Twitter account at Philly Godfather. So we got a great opportunity to make some money here.
49ers. See that? If I would have known, right? Next year. We'll be all right with Lamar. Lamar's going to have his detractors. We know that. It's okay.
great athletes. Just the playoffs are a different animal.
Got to win in January, absolutely.
No question.
I am Nestor. We're all at the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. All of the cool stuff we're doing down here in Miami Beach. Luke and I are hanging. We're drinking some Liberty Pure water because you can't drink the water down here in Florida. It tastes like salt water. So dumping my Liberty Pure water all over the place. And Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Big appreciation to Ed, Frank, the whole Royal Farms family for sending us down here. No gas, no coffee. I'm slumming down here in South Beach. What can I say? We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.